The other day, I was perusing on the internet as one does when trying to figure out what video I'm going to be making next, and I came across this article, Top 10 Pros and Cons of Living in Iowa. And I noticed it was written by a company that probably doesn't know a whole lot about Iowa, so I was curious, how accurate are they on their pros and cons, and if it's even worth a read or not? And that's what we're going to cover today, because I'm curious if they know more than I do, because I've lived in the state of Iowa my entire life. So we're going to go through what they have to say. I'm going to give you my opinion on what they have to say and if it's true or not. So let's dive in, take a look at this article, and see what they have to say. All right, so what do they have to say? Well, obviously, at the very beginning, they're just giving us a rundown about what Iowa's like, but that's not really what I'm interested in. I'm actually more interested in the pros and cons. And the very first thing I'm going to say is take a look at this picture. That is the old Welcome to Iowa sign, not the new one. Now, whether or not the old one is better than the new one, that's up for debate. But first off, they don't have the right sign, so I don't know. That might be counting against them, but let's continue on here and see what they have to say. Okay, so number one, pro. The state is perfect for cycling. Yes, this is a big pro, and a lot of people like this. Why? We have some great roads all throughout the state. It's really built around cycling. In fact, during the summer, there is something called RegBri. Some people call it a race. Most people call it just a ride. And what it is, it's put on by the Des Moines Register, which is a newspaper in Des Moines. And it's literally starting on the west side of Iowa and riding your bike all the way over to the east side. Now, every year, the pathway changes. So they announce it at some point during the year and let people know what that pathway is going to be. I believe last year was their 50th annual ride, so it's been going on quite a long time, but thousands and thousands and thousands of people come to this bike ride, and it's really kind of cool to see. I've never been in it, although I think I might try to do it this year. I've been doing a little practicing myself on my road bike. We'll see. I've never gone that far before. So if you have any tips, if you're a bike rider yourself, I'd love to hear some tips that you might have when it comes to riding those kinds of long distances. But either way, the pro is yes, it's very much a friendly state for cyclists. Every city that you go to, Des Moines, Quad Cities, Cedar Rapids, most of them are going to have some really cool bike trails that go throughout the city as well as outside the city. Here in the Quad Cities, we have a bike trail that wraps the entire Quad Cities, but then it goes up the river a long ways, so you don't have to get into any traffic. So there's just a lot of infrastructure when it comes to cycling here in Iowa that is very beneficial to cyclists and very friendly to cyclists. So I would agree on their first one. It is a perfect state in order to do some cycling. But what else do they have to say? Con. Iowa is a landlocked state. This fact that it's true, I guess. If it's a con, that's up for debate. You know, it could be a con if you really like to travel. But here's the thing. Iowa's right in the middle of the United States. So whether you're going to the East Coast or the West Coast, it's a really a short flight no matter which direction you go. So yeah, it technically is landlocked, but if you want to get out and go see someplace that isn't, it's fairly easy to do that because we have flights that go directly to a lot of the vacation spots outside of it. But what is it like actually living here? Well, we don't have a ton of beaches, and the ones that we do, they're usually man-made lakes like Centerville Lake, Lake Rathburn, a few others like Lake Okoboji, although I don't believe that one is man-made. That's in the north part of Iowa, and I believe that's a glacier-formed lake up there. And, that's about it as far as beachfront property, and even that is questionable at most. We don't have any mountains, I can tell you that much. We do have what we call the Les Hills in the west side of the state, which is where I grew up. So I'm very, very familiar over there. But even that, it's definitely not a mountain. They're pretty steep for the state of Iowa, but they're not a mountain. But yes, 100% true. We are a landlocked state. It just depends on if that's a con for you, because some people really like the fact that we're right here in the Midwest, really close by. All right, so that's the first pro and con. What else do they got going on here? Pro, you can find low cost of living throughout the state. Yes, that is true. Iowa is ranked amongst one of the most affordable states when it comes to purchasing property. Now, this is very specific in each market that you go in. If you go look where I'm at, it's considered a little bit more affordable. But if you go look in Des Moines, that's one of the more expensive areas. But on the average, Iowa is definitely a much more affordable place to live. Your dollar goes further, and you can actually purchase properties and not, be in debt for the rest of your life, because your dollar does go a little further here. The thing I'll tell you about properties, though, is property taxes are on the higher side than a lot of states. It's kind of an interesting dynamic, because over here where I live next to the state of Illinois. I'm a realtor on both sides, and a lot of people are moving away from Illinois into Iowa to get away from the property taxes. But when you're comparing to the property taxes in Illinois compared to Iowa, it looks great. But when you're comparing Iowa to other states, it's really not that great. So just keep that in mind. Yes, you can get a pretty decent house for an affordable price, but the property taxes are a little bit on the higher side when you look at the national average. Now, we've looked at that pro. That's our second pro. What is our second con? Well, they are saying our second con is the state is rural. Okay, so this is kind of on the same topic of, is that a con or a pro? Some people want to get away from it all. Iowa is a great place for that. We have a few cities. We have places like Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, Davenport, Council Bluffs, maybe Fort Dodge, Ames is in there possibly. But otherwise than that, it's very rural and a lot of small towns everywhere, which if you're used to hustle and bustle and being able to go and get whatever you want at any point in time, this may be a issue for you. But a lot of people are moving to the state to get into that rural or that small town. Maybe they're looking at doing homesteading. Maybe they are going to start a farm. Something along those lines. Iowa is going to be a great choice when it comes to that. But I get it. If you're coming from a big city, you're used to that hustle and bustle. Iowa doesn't have a lot of that. We have, like I said, a few core cities that can handle it. But overall, it is a very rural state. So is it a pro? Is it a con? It really depends on you. And here's the thing about Iowa. I don't service all of Iowa. Technically, I could, but you don't want me to. I'm a realtor here. I service the Quad Cities area specifically, but because of this channel, I get people reaching out to me all the time looking to purchase in other parts of the state. And as a part of that, I've developed a network across the state of realtors that know their specific market. So if you're moving here to Iowa, if you're in the Quad Cities, hit me up. But if you're not, still hit me up, because I can hook you up with a realtor at a different market. And the ones I work with are top notch. So you're going to want to hit me up. My number is popping up down below. All right, so we got our first two pros and cons. What is the next one? The next one is Iowa is known for its agricultural history. Pro. I don't know if that's a pro. I don't really know if that's a con. I don't really understand that one. It's a true fact. That doesn't make it positive or negative necessarily, but we do have a ton of farms here. Talked about the rural aspect of Iowa. It's rural everywhere, small towns everywhere. You're going to have a lot of farmer friends, as growing up, farmer friends like that, and you're going to see a lot of it. You have to be aware in the harvest time that you're going to possibly get stuck behind a tractor. You're going to have that big orange sign, slow moving vehicle. That's an Iowa traffic jam. It's something you have to deal with. Again, it's a pro in this case. I can see it. There's a lot of locally grown stuff. But overall, our culture of agriculture is monoculture, which is corn that is called field corn, which is not the corn that you typically eat fresh off the cob. That's called sweet corn. Ask me how I know. Definitely been around a few times here. And we also have soybeans, which is our other main crop. Otherwise than that, we do have farmers markets. We do have places you can get fresh produce. But overall, most of the state is going to be soybeans or corn. And it's cool to have that, and I love it. And we love our farmers. But at the same time, it's not like where you have all these different types of produce getting grown everywhere. It's very monoculture when it comes to the state. So Iowa known for its agriculture industry. That's a good thing, but it depends on who you are. If you're not a farmer, then you may not care about it too much. All right, so what is our next con? I'm very curious at what this is going to look like. Okay, con, limited recreational opportunities. Yes, I would say this is a con, and again, it kind of depends on who you are. There is different parts of the state that has different levels of recreational opportunities. Depending on what you're looking for, if you're looking for a community, maybe sports leagues, maybe, I don't know, cat petting cafe, something like that, you might have a little bit of trouble unless you're living in one of the larger cities, again, like Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, Davenport, Council Bluffs. But if you're out in the small towns, you're probably going to be a little bit limited on the recreational activities. Caveat, if you're living in a small town and you like the outdoors, there's a much better chance that you can get out onto public land, go hiking, fishing, hunting, all that sort of stuff, and that's a really cool benefit. But there is a divide, I would say, in Iowa, because I grew up on the west side, went to school in central Iowa, and then I am obviously living in eastern Iowa now. And the biggest difference I would say is western Iowa, you're going to have a lot more opportunities to be outside with public land like I was describing, and there's just a lot less people. But as I moved to central and moved to eastern, there's more people and kind of less public land to get out. It's not zero, but that's probably my biggest gripe when moving to eastern Iowa is there wasn't as many opportunities to get out and hike. You do have places like Scott County Park, Wildcat Den, but compared to what I grew up in the Les Hills, it's very limited, and there's a lot more people here utilizing it. It's not a bad thing, but I also really like that aspect of western Iowa. So you got to keep that in mind. I would say, yes, this is a con, but if you're looking for it, you usually can find something to do. All right, so moving on. So far, so good. I think this article does a decent job at what it's describing. You can tell there's some things that maybe they don't quite fully understand, but again, hey, we're taking it with a grain of salt. This is only my opinion. Some people would have different opinions as well. But what do they have going on for the next pro? You can enjoy a little to no traffic in Iowa. This is 100% true. I talk about it on my channel quite often, and it's very enjoyable to not have to deal with traffic in Iowa. It is not zero, but it's very, very low when it comes to Iowa traffic. I talked about an Iowa traffic jam earlier, which is typically a slow-moving vehicle, aka tractor, combine, something of the sort. Yeah, you might get stuck behind that for 5 minutes if you can't go into the passing lane, but it's really not that bad. The places that do have a little bit more traffic, obviously, are the bigger cities, Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, Davenport. But even those are not too bad. I would say of all of them, probably Des Moines is the worst. For some reason, I have to pass through there to go see my family when I come on holiday for Christmas or Thanksgiving or something like that. And it always seems to be the worst traffic in Des Moines when I'm going through that area. Probably just my bad luck. But even then, you're not typically stopped on the interstate. You're typically still moving. That being said, there was one time I came back during the winter, big snowstorm, giant, I think it's 26 car pileup that happened in front of me, and I had to wait on the interstate for 2 hours. But that's a little bit of an unusual situation. It wasn't just the everyday traffic. It's obviously something really bad happened in order for that to be a part of my travels. But overall, traffic is pretty good. So I would agree with this one as a pro because I've had to drive through a lot of cities, and let me tell you, I hate it, and I always love coming back to Iowa when it comes to traffic. Now, if the picture doesn't tell you, I'm guessing the next con is going to be about natural disasters. And exactly, you'll have to prepare for natural disasters. Thing about this is no matter where you're living, you're going to have to prepare for a natural disaster. But what in Iowa specifically should you be prepared for? Well, the obvious big one is tornadoes. We have them. Are they everywhere? No, not really. I've lived in the state of Iowa for 30 years and I've never physically seen a tornado. So that gives you a little perspective. We do have them. They're very devastating when they do happen. But to be honest, most of them happen out in the rural farmland. Farm gets tore up. But in the cities, it's a little bit more of a rare occurrence and or small towns. Thank the Lord for that. But you still have to be prepared for it. And when you come prepared for a tornado, you really want to have a basement or a shelter to go to, because when a tornado comes through, you're going to want to be in that safe space, because everything above the ground is a potential to get leveled or taken away. So you really want to make sure that you have some place to go. And a lot of people don't know that when they move here, because they're not used to having basements in their houses, depending on where you're coming from. So very crucial to know that. Other natural disasters that happen, a little bit more minor, are hailstorms, thunderstorms. Yes, it happens. It's not a huge problem, but it does happen. And then obviously blizzards. Again, if you live anywhere in the Midwest, you're going to have to be prepared for that. It's not anything super unusual. But the most scary one that people see are obviously the tornadoes that happen. And I talked about that a little bit, where it happens. I've never seen it, but it does happen. So take those into consideration. Is it a con? Sure. Is it something you have to deal with all the time? No, it just happens once in a while. Moving on to number 9 Pro. Iowa has a rich historical legacy. I don't know what they're talking about here. They say something about Native American tribes. Yes, we have had a lot of Native American tribes. A lot of our cities are named after Native American tribes, which is great. But we've had a lot of Europeans move in. We've had immigration. I don't really see this as a pro or con. I'd say overall we're pretty good in this aspect. But again, it's, for me, neither here nor there. I wouldn't say it's a huge part of our culture. So I don't really agree or disagree on this one. I'd say it's, definitely there, but I don't know. I just don't say it's, a big aspect of our culture here in Iowa. And then number 10, con. Yes, con, there are no professional sports teams. And when we're talking professional, we're talking major leagues teams. We do have professional sports teams, but minor leagues. We have like the Iowa Cubs. We have the River Bandits, which is our 2 baseball teams in Iowa. We have the Des Moines hockey team. I can't think of what it's called. They're associated with the Minnesota Wild. We do have sports. It's just not professional, not the major leagues, not the NFL, nothing like that. So what you typically see is sports fans, depending on where they're at in Iowa, is where their team is. So North Iowa, you're going to see a lot of Vikings fans, a lot of Twins, a lot of Wild. In Southern Iowa, we're going to see a lot of Kansas City Chiefs, Royals, that sort of thing. So it just really kind of depends on where you're at, because we don't have anything in Iowa, so there's not a lot of culture around a particular sports team. So you get those rivalries depending on where you're at in Iowa. So just keep that in mind. To me, I'm not a big sports guy. I like it, but I'm not watching all the time, so it hasn't really affected my life too much. But it's definitely something to note. If you are a professional sports fan, it can be a big con if you're moving to Iowa. So I'll agree with that when it comes to a con here in Iowa. Now, this article was written by Anna Guzman. Don't know if she has been to Iowa. Don't know if she lives here. I don't know anything about her. I would overall probably give her a B plus, maybe A minus on the article as far as how accurate it is. And that's pretty good. That's a pretty good score when it comes to an article that you'll find on the internet. I don't know their methodology on how they decided on the pros and cons. But again, I'd say it's pretty good when it comes to my experience of living here for over 30 years. So take it with how you think. But if you're moving here, if you want to find out the very specific things about whatever city that you're moving to or whatever small town you're moving to, give me a call. My number is popping up down below. I'd love to help you out or get you the help that you need depending on which market that you're in, because I have all those wonderful agents all around the state. But if you're curious what the state looks like, I did make a vlog where I went to all parts of the state to show you what that looks like.